Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are talking about the coronavirus. I know this is Tesla Daily, not Coronavirus Daily, but obviously coronavirus is the biggest factor on the macro environment right now. Macro environment has a huge impact on Tesla as a stock and potentially Tesla as a company. So I think it's worth spending a lot of time focusing on coronavirus. There are a couple pieces of short-term Tesla news, nothing critical that I think we can get to later this week, but I think for today our best efforts are focused on coronavirus. That being said, this episode is a little bit different, as you can probably tell if you're watching on YouTube. I'm doing this sort of in one take. I was having some issues with my audio interface, which is part of my editing process that I normally do. So we'll get back to that when I am able to resolve those. It's past midnight here, though, so I kind of just need to get this out. So bear with me on some of my vocalized pauses and things like that with this episode, and hopefully we'll get back to normal soon. So that being said, I've got my notes here on my phone, just going to look through those. On coronavirus, the World Health Organization has today changed the classification of coronavirus from multiple epidemics throughout the world to a pandemic. So the classification for a pandemic is a virus that causes illness or death, and there's person-to-person spread, and there's evidence of that spread throughout the world. So obviously with coronavirus, we are seeing that now. So no surprise to see this change in classification. The World Health Organization director today said a couple of interesting quotes saying, quote, "Deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction," end quote. So I think that inaction part is pretty important, and we'll come back to that a little bit later because we do have a lot of action that's happening today. He also added, quote, "We cannot say this loudly enough or clearly enough or often enough. All countries can still change the course of this pandemic," end quote. So obviously we've seen evidence of effective adjustments being made to society in China, in the Hubei province where this breakout originated. Cases are actually continued to decline there, and new cases in mainland China, I think were like 15 today, which is the lowest that it's been in weeks, and I think only about 6 of those were in Hubei. That could be a little bit wrong. Again, this is sort of just one take here. But the point is that the actions that they have taken, which have been pretty aggressive, have proved to be effective in reducing the spread of coronavirus. So that can be used as a model for other countries to help also reduce the spread. That being said, as it is a pandemic, the spread has already occurred. So there's going to be a limited effect of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But in terms of the spread in the United States, we are now at 43 states that have reported cases. We're at over 1,200 cases. And with the limited amount of testing and people that may not be tested because of the severity, we're likely at thousands of cases in the United States already, and this continues to grow day by day. So we are starting to see more and more action being taken. Trump addressed the nation tonight and announced that we would be placing travel restrictions on traveling from the EU to the US. So he did say originally that this would involve both people and cargo, but he actually misspoke on that, which caused a little bit of confusion, clarifying later in a tweet, quote, "Please remember, very important for all countries and businesses to know that trade will in no way be affected by the 30-day restriction on travel from Europe. The restriction stops people, not goods," end quote. So that was clarified. It will just be person travel right now rather than cargo. But that still is a significant action that's being taken. Obviously, that's not going to prevent the spread from being in the US. It's already here. But these sort of actions can be taken to, again, reduce that spread, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. So the point of trying to reduce the spread is to spread the cases out, spread the infections out over time, because if we have too many cases occurring at one time, that's going to overwhelm the healthcare system, and that's where you can see some really bad outcomes because you sort of have to pick and choose who gets treatment there, and that's not a situation that anybody wants to be in, and it just causes a lot of stress on the entire healthcare and economic system. So if you can even reduce the spread by taking some of these actions, even if that's not going to stop it completely, if you can slow it down, there's a lot of positive benefits to that. So this EU travel restriction is one of those steps. We're also seeing continuation of cancellations of large events. So some notable ones today, the NCAA has made the decision to not allow fans to attend any of the March Madness games, so the NCAA tournament, for either the men or women's tournaments. So that's a huge event throughout the entire nation throughout the course of March. It makes sense why they're doing that because there's a lot of travel involved for fans that are attending that tournament. So steps like this are being taken to curtail the spread, slow it down. We also saw the NBA today sort of accelerate through reacting to coronavirus. With this morning, people were saying that the NBA should also take those steps of not allowing fans to attend the games. And then this afternoon, we saw the Warriors go ahead and take that step, announcing that their game tomorrow would not allow fans to attend. It would just be, event staff, things like that. And then this evening, a player for the Jazz, actually right before tip-off for one of their games, tested positive for coronavirus. So they called that game off, and then pretty shortly thereafter announced that they would actually be suspending the NBA season. So we're continuing to see more and more of these restrictions and actions being taken to hopefully reduce and slow down this spread. And I think we're pretty much in the early stages here. In countries like Italy, where the spread has continued to be very aggressive, and not that it's necessarily out of control, but it is not yet contained. We've seen aggressive efforts. Today they went on lockdown. So essentially what that means is that restaurants, bars, stores, things like that, non-essential things, have been told to close, not be open for business. They do still allow delivery and things like that from restaurants, but pretty much the only establishments that are allowed to stay open are pharmacies and grocery stores, things like that, sort of those essential things. But otherwise, it's a pretty significant lockdown happening in Italy. And in the United States, we're not at that level yet, but our sort of breakout in terms of coronavirus spread is a couple weeks behind Italy. I think if we track the cases and sort of the accumulation of those cases, we're about 11 days behind them. So I would expect over the next few days, as coronavirus continues to spread, as we get more and more cases in more and more locations, I think these lockdown efforts and restrictions on travel and events being canceled, I think we're just going to continue to see those escalate. That obviously puts pressure on the economy. It causes people to be more and more concerned. And then we have, on top of, event cancellations and things like that, you have, famous people now getting coronavirus. You've got the NBA player. You've got Tom Hanks today announcing that him and his wife both are tested positive for coronavirus. They're currently in Australia. So I think this continues to just, the sort of panic that Elon Musk alluded to is accelerating, but at the same time, these lockdown efforts have been shown to be needed to sort of curtail the spread. And where we haven't seen those lockdown efforts, we haven't seen the spread diminished yet. So that creates a lot of those uncertainty factors that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. So I continue to think that this is going to get worse before it gets better, at least when it comes to the United States, in terms of our reaction. And I think based on all of the reading that I've done, I mean, this is a really difficult topic, and I'm not an expert in any of these fields, but I have been spending a lot of time reading about it, and I don't want to be alarmist or anything like that, but it does seem like more action needs to be taken to curtail this thing, and I think that more action is going to end up being taken over the next week or two. And as those things happen, I think it's going to continue to put more and more pressure on the markets. So anyway, let's see where we're at here. We also continue to see school closings. So Seattle is closing all public schools for 2 weeks. I've heard from multiple friends that universities are switching to online classes, at least basically through March. Some are extending spring breaks to have just more off time. College students probably love that. But so a lot of universities are taking these actions. The United Nations actually estimated that 20% of students are out of school worldwide right now due to coronavirus. So these things have economic impacts. The EU travel restrictions, event cancellations, postponing the NBA season. There's economic fallout from that. Maybe not to the degree that we've seen the markets fall, where it's down 20% or whatever like that. That's a significant difference, but there is economic impact here, and that uncertainty remains about how much impact that's going to have and how much the healthcare system is going to potentially be overwhelmed by the rate of spread. So those are kind of the big things. I mean, a couple other notes here. So the late night shows and morning shows, those are, going without audiences. So I think the media attention just continues to rise. One of the things I've been watching here over the last few days is just Google Trends and the search interest in coronavirus. I think, so starting off, that continues to increase. Over last week, I think in the United States, just going from memory here, the search index, if you use Google Trends before, it basically just tells you a relativity index. So currently, coronavirus search relativity is at 100, which means it's the most that it's been in the last 90 days. And if we compare just to a week ago in the United States, the index was a 68, I believe. So interest has, increased by whatever that is, a third over the last week. And I think that's going to continue to increase. When we think about the stock market, one of the things you're sort of running as a testing theory is I don't think the markets are going to really return to normal until we start to see that search interest decline. I think right now this panic is continuing to build and escalate. And again, that uncertainty is building and escalating. And now people are starting to see the impact here in the US. I think that heightens the concern. So until this sort of levels off in terms of even just the conversation about coronavirus, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the markets. So that, regardless of how Tesla's doing on the micro level as an individual company and fundamentally, we've seen Elon say that the panic is dumb, and he's talking about building a Cybertruck factory. That's not something you would do if you were concerned about just the general economy or you're standing in business. Regardless of that, though, and Tesla's strength, they can be relatively strong in a down market and still be down. If the stock market goes down 30%, not that I'm saying it's going to, but if it does, Tesla can still be down 20% and overperform. So even if Tesla reports really good, Q1 deliveries, really strong production out of Gigafactory Shanghai, really strong production on Model Y, they might be a relative overperformer, but that has the potential to just get washed away in a macro environment that's tough. And right now, from all the signs that I'm seeing out there, they look tough. So, hopefully this was a decent recap on just the news for today. It's tough for me to do these one take things, but we'll be back tomorrow, and hopefully I'll get this other stuff up and running. But that will, I think, wrap it up for today. As always, thank you for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter @TeslaPodcast, and I'll see you tomorrow for the Thursday, March 12th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.